Wednesday, September 28th, 2011, and this is Day 9 Daily number 353. Yeah, 353 of them. That's a lot. I do this daily a lot. Yeah. I am very excited because tomorrow I will be heading on down to the Red Bull headquarters in Santa Monica, California, where I will be getting ready for the Red Bull LAN that starts on Friday. So I'm very excited about that. I just ate some pizza, which I'm very excited about, and I'm having a little bit of that catatonic after effect where it's like, oh, I had pizza, it feels so good. So I'm just sort of indulging in this feeling, and we will continue to indulge in it as we talk about Protoss vs. Protoss today. Just wanted to make sure everyone knew that the Mana Battles the Fun Day Monday for next week is Team Mana Battles. Team Mana Battles, a 3v3 or a 4v4 Mana Battle. Submit to Monday at day9.tv. No Newbie Tuesday next week. I have too much work to do. Also, Husky and I are casting the GeForce SC2 Pro-Am Finals tomorrow from 6 to 9 p.m. Go to geforce.com for more information. And I guess we should go into the game right now. Yeah. It's Protoss vs. Protoss, and Protoss vs. Protoss is weird. Protoss vs. Protoss is actually just dumb. At least it was. And I just want to give a little bit of brief kudos to Blizzard Entertainment for patching the game the way they did to kind of peel Protoss vs. Protoss out of the kind of pit of despair that it was in for quite some time. I mean, obviously the biggest issue that Protoss vs. Protoss comes into is that with the warp-in mechanic, my units are at your base immediately. So that means that there's no such thing as a defender's advantage. You know, you might have 4 stalkers and I might have 3, and they have to walk to my base, and then you can immediately warp in another 4 stalkers at my base. And this is only really a big issue early game, because as the game gets later and later and later, you can, you know, maneuver better with force fields, or you can just quite honestly kill off Dem pylons. And also the bigger units like Colossi Immortals, they can't warp in. So of course the 4 warp gate became really, really huge, but now all of a sudden you just can't warp in on ramps. So now you can't do the thing where you just warp in up on high grounds and do a ton of damage, right? At the start of the game. So this is a game between a Korean Protoss, named some Korean stuff that I can't read, and Next Sickness, who's really, really good. And I figured we'd just take a re-look at Protoss vs. Protoss with the sound on and talk about the matchup in sort of this reformulated way, because the warp-in was always really, really scary early on, but if any of you Protossers have actually stepped in and started to really try to PvP a lot lately, it is just a different game, like, completely. It's really kind of weird, and it's like everyone's starting to figure it out, because, you know, it was like with 4-gate versus 4-gate, if you didn't do it, you lost, right? So it's not like now all of a sudden there's these people who are like, well, that's good, I was going Immortals all the time anyways, and I will use that skill set. It's like all of a sudden there's huge reasons not to build a bunch of these extra buildings early on and to spend it on other things, and you can get away with expanding earlier and all that sort of good jazz. And because Protoss vs. Protoss has 2 Protoss players playing in it at the same time, it means we are lucky enough to be able to talk about both sides of the people playing at the same time. In particular, Next Sickness is going to kind of do some funky aggression in this game that I'm not exactly so sure I like, and we're going to kind of see how that gets punished and some of the big differences that go on. So this is obviously Backwater Gulch, one of the ladder maps. It has this big pair of wide open entrances. You have yourself a thin ramp, but I think it's safe to say that it can be pretty difficult to defend this natural expansion. It's not something nice and easy. Well, it might be a little easier to defend than on others, because overall this amount of space is pretty small. Zelnaga Caverns would be an example of a very, very, very big spread out space. So the kinda early gateway by our blue Protoss, and Next Sickness is going to throw down himself a little bit later of a gateway at the entrance. And already this is something that feels a little bit weird. But for any of you unfamiliar with the sort of wall-offs at the front, a very clever thing that I think Naniwal was the first player I saw do, to deal with a 4 warp gate, what he'd simply do is just build 2 gateways at the front of his base to create like a wall. And if he saw a 4-gate coming, he would wall himself off completely, and then you just couldn't warp into the high ground. The reason this feels a little bit off is because the pylon is like participating here. And if for some reason I had vision up on here, hell, even if I had an observer, I'd be able to like deal some damage here. So I'm not so sure I like this for your later game stuff, but we'll end up coming back to it in a bit. Notice Next Sickness not getting his gas yet. Isn't that kind of weird? And if you thought yes, then that is actually the correct answer in this circumstance. Meanwhile, we see our blue Protoss playing a little bit normally. And now we see the double gas going down for Next Sickness, which might seem a little bit unusual, but is one of these weird timings that many a player are starting to experiment with. Just suddenly plopping down double gas geysers. Because one of those things where, like, I could mine at, like, a constant rate to get to here, or I could just mine from, or like do nothing and then mine from 2 gas and pop up. And this means that you have more minerals for a brief period of time to kind of play around with. This is cool. Overall, some good stuff. Our cybernetics core is delayed, but only as much as our gateway was delayed. This is kind of cool to me, quite honestly. I think that's kind of nifty. Zealot getting produced from our blue Protoss, and I guess I like this. This is almost never a bad thing if you can be appropriately aggressive with it. And also, as Red pops in here to scout, old school Protoss versus Protoss revolved largely around the chrono boost on the Nexus. That literally was the linchpin of everything in PvP. How much energy is on that Nexus? Because the higher it was, that means the more chrono boost on the warp gate, that means the faster the warp gate came. So what people kind of like to do is they would spend 1 extra chrono boost on their own probes, and then all the rest on their warp gate. So for instance, if you had 75 energy, and I was at 75, I would spend 1 chrono boost on my probes, and then like the remaining 2 on my warp gate, or something like that. If you're ever like more than that behind, you would have a ton of trouble, but not in our new era of PvP. So we now see the 2-gate play. There's the chrono boost on the warp gate. The probe is continuing to spot at everything. And a pretty similar opening from both these players. I mean, we do see that our Next Sickness player does have these 2 extra gateways out, is spending a little bit of chrono boost on his cybernetics core, and the Zealot is out. And in a sense, he built a Zealot instead of building this geyser. This Protoss player built a geyser instead of building a Zealot. As expected, and their probe counts are absolutely freaking identical. And in the spot that you would see the blue Protoss player in, he would be guaranteed to have to build 2 gateways right now. That's what he used to have to do. But we're immediately going to see some weirdnesses pop out of Next Sickness in this early game. I'm not actually going through this very quickly at all. Normally I go through the game sort of like shooting through really quickly. But I want to take the extra bit of time to re-watch through this early part of the game because Protoss vs. Protoss is weird now. All the rules are sort of different. Like this early, where is it? Where is the hell the units? There they are. The early Zealot Stalker pressure was so commonplace, and this follow-up with the sort of aggressive warp-in shenanigans, really scary. But now all of a sudden, 1 sentry just planting a single pylon there, it just wrecks. Absolutely stops it cold. You have like 2 gateways here. And you actually just constantly make the sentries. If he is 4-gating, you'll probably need at least like a 3rd gate to make some stuff, or a robo. You can't hold the 2-gate with just a 4-gate if he keeps on making stuff. And likewise, our blue player kinda doesn't want to be 4-gated, so he is going to move out as aggressively as he can with these stalkers. And the way the logic used to work is, cool, I'm going to be aggressive with my stalkers early on. I'm going to prevent this. I'm going to prevent a proxy pylon. And that will delay his 4 warp gate. Well, that's not actually as big a concern anymore, because we're just so comfy and safe. Now, Next Sickness is going to go for this robo facility, and he's really going to be using it a lot. And in PvP now, I think the robo facility creates all the interestingness, because we're seeing players now do weird things like 1 gate, 1 robo, expand, then add on 2 to 3 more gates. And the Robo will constantly be producing Immortals, like constantly nonstop. Maybe try to sneak out an Observer, and then the other gateways will pick up. I don't quite like this extra gateway by Next Sickness. Seems a little bit unnecessary in terms of, I guess, just pressuring and being aggressive. But we're seeing a huge moment right here. 5 minutes and 50 seconds is when your typical 4-gate would finish. This is like the scary moment. And what does Next Sickness have? He has a Stalker and he has 2 sentries. And the Stalker is on, and the sentry is on the far side, so it can't even be shot at when he throws down. Zealots can't even get in the way. And of course this placement allows a little bit of leeway where I can like force field here, 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 or even here to block it. But here and lower is where I want to hit it. And of course Next Sickness sees the warp in. But this is like really weird to have seen this Nexus get thrown down right now. If we come back into the base of our Protoss buddy, he has enough Chrono Boost saved up that he can actually do another re-warping, or excuse me, a Chrono Boost on both of these. But look at this, 2-gate into Nexus, no gas yet. This to me, I'm trying to think how much I really like this, or whether I like it a lot or not. In my eyes, having a bunch of Stalkers out early will obviously allow you to push him back, but let's see how this Protoss player can deal with it. In a sense, what he's doing is he's creating a defender's advantage. It's a total mistake that he is not checking, or that he did not check there earlier. He's checking there right now, but by pushing his opponent all the way back, now all of a sudden our blue player has time to be able to go, uh-oh, looks like there's a lot of units up here. Suddenly, quickly build 2 gates, or even something more extreme like building a forge. And look at this unbelievably thin little defense by Next Sickness. Just the most fragile defense you'll ever see. Throws down a force field. Morphs in a sentry and a stalker. Yeah. Very atypical. Stalker staying forward. 1 stalker pulling backwards. And immediately building 2 gateways. This is something you really do not see at all. Now, I will say, I think that this, going for 4 gates, after you do this early expand, not a lot of people are used to seeing this sort of style of play because it was 4-gate for like a year. But especially in early beta when people did like terrible 4-gates, and we're still doing a lot of Blink Stalker stuff, if you early expand and you go 4 gateways, you can quite easily deal with someone who's going Blink Stalkers. Pretty easily. I mean, you have to be a little careful with your control, but you just have so many more units than them, and you can constantly be building out of all of those gateways. It's not like a usual 4 warp gate where you kind of like warp in, run out of money, pray a little bit, and then you're stuck down to building out of 2 or 3. And look, we see that this player, our purple Protoss, is just continually sort of poke and prod to get himself up. And meanwhile, Next Sickness is going to be going for this non-stop Immortal play. And of course he warps him down here just to try to peel this off a little bit. He will have to begin retreating, but hey, you know what's exciting for me? This is suddenly a real game. This isn't just a 4 warp gate garbage. 4 warp gate goofiness. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a brief break. We talked a little bit about the logic of both their openings and why they seem to make sense in this Protoss. And we're going to come back and do some theorizing of some next steps from both players' point of view. So whatever you do, don't go anywhere because part 2 is coming up right now. Well, actually in like 2 minutes. Yeah.